And we are back. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And we are here to talk about more interesting stuff that we are finding in the Quran. So, with us, Kash, as always. Hello, Kash. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm really looking forward to this one and the next sessions, as we have already established quite a few things and the problems with the Aramaic and so on. And we are getting into the very cool stuff.
Yeah, this is where we get into the material that actually has weight, has consequence to it. So
Yeah,
that's
and
what we're
so
going to
far we have talked about two matters. So let me actually get the slides ready. And yeah, that looks quite good.
like you were
So
saying, we went through the magical Arabic. That was just establishing that the Rasm has problems with it and ambiguity to it. And then we went into the Islamic dilemma, exploring what the standard idea of the Islamic dilemma is and implying that there's more to it, which we're going to now start getting into. And the third topic now is the Furqan. Furqan, if you are familiar with certain content on this website and other places where you have debates happening, Furqan is assumed by all parties involved to mean criterion, strictly criterion. And this is accepted by the Muslims, this is accepted by the Christian apologists, it's accepted by everyone. Furqan is the word that means criterion. But does it? Let's start having a look, shall we?
yeah, there is only one way to find out, and that's actually to look at the verses. And these are the first two. So we have here in Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 53 and 185. So 53, and as we gave Moses the writing and the Furqan, that ye may be guided. Now, this actually reminds me when, even before we started to work together, that this particular verse was doing my head in. It's like, okay, so what do we know from the Abrahamic faith that was given to Moses? So if the writing is the Torah, then the Furqan should be the Ten Commandments, the tablets. But when you take that meaning and then you look at the other verses, you realize that that's not the case. So that Furqan had to be something else. I'm looking forward to actually seeing what we find when we dig a little bit deeper. And with the second verse, so the month of Ramadan, which the Quran was made to descend in as guidance for humans and evidencers from the guidance and the Furqan. This actually I should have mentioned before, but it is written in there. This is from the translation of Saint Murad. As we're going to see not only in this show but in other live streams going forward, is that the translation from Saint Murad is very literal. It says exactly what it is in there, and if a word doesn't exist or didn't exist in 1400 years ago in the Arabic, he will not translate it, which obviously helps us to zero in on those words and see why those words were not Arabic and now they have become so. So, but it is the translation from Saint Murad that actually gives us quite a few of the answers. It is very, very literal. So we can see things like the tenses and quite a few other things. So it's a bit harder to read, but that's actually what Arabic speakers experience with the Quran. So we are getting the Arabic experience reading it in English. So if there is something, sometimes I might add like commas or punctuation marks in his translation just to make it a little bit easier to read, but otherwise I will just keep it as he translated. On this one, we have added Furqan, as it would appear just in red and in brackets so that it actually sticks out and we see in which context it would be. But seeing as there is going to be quite a few of these verses, or well, just a handful, we better start making notes. So from these two, we better actually write that it was given to Moses. So as we're trying to figure out what Furqan actually was, we know it was given to Moses, whatever it was. We also know in here it is attached to the guidance and the Furqan. It's talking like really to the sending as guidance for humans and evidencers from the guidance and the Furqan, which of course that would means already it is not the tablets, the Ten Commandments. So anyway, we make those notes and
Well,
let's
I
see what
think
else we find.
one second more. I go back.
Yep.
I mean, it's JC, obviously. So what I was going to say is that I think what we have here with 185, right, is that on the naked eye, just because Murad is not putting commas in, he's not making any assumptions, he's just giving you the text like it is, right? So was made to descend in as guidance for humans and evidencers from the guidance. Now it makes sense. The evidencers from the guidance is one piece of the sentence, and the Furqan. So that makes more sense of it, right? These are for humans and evidencers from the guidance. What the guidance is here exactly, and who the evidencers from the guidance is, I will happily get into this verse another time. There's something very, juicy about what Ramadan is and what this verse is talking about. But just to
Yes,
clarify,
Ramadan, Quran, month, descent, guidance. There is lots of keywords there. We need to we will unpack them in the next streams. So for now, we will just focus on the Furqan appears on that particular verse. But yes, this is a verse that we will look into in detail in the future.
right? So, but the point here is to note, okay, so the Furqan was given to Moses, one, and two, in the month of Ramadan, the Furqan was descended.
Made to descend.
Made to descend, right, okay. Cool, so then let's look at some other verses. We'll fill out this clipboard then, shall we?
Yes. So next section.
We are looking now at Surah 8, from the Murad, verse 29. If ye foretend Allah, He will render for you a Furqan and will cover up your fronts. Okay, interesting. Same surah, we're now on verse 41. And what we have descended over our servant on the day of Furqan, the day when the two combinations encountered, and Allah is over everything a determiner. So what can we gain from these two verses? One is that He will render a Furqan. This is in the future tense. So at the time of the Quran's revelation, supposedly He will in the future render a Furqan. This already right away conflicts with the standard Islamic narrative, which claims that sure, yeah, Moses was given the Furqan too, but by and large, Furqan means Quran, bro. Okay, so the Quran is the criterion. That's why they render Furqan as criterion. The Christian apologists accept this idea of the Quran, Furqan meaning criterion precisely because it also is used to refer to the Torah, or that's how they think of it, right? Because it says that the Torah was descended and the Furqan in that other verse we looked at, right? So therefore, the Christian apologists accept this. But anyway, so there's already a problem. The future tense here of will render a Furqan, a criterion. Interesting. Okay, and what can we gain from the second one is that it was descended in the past. So we have in the future and in the past, right? We have descended, past tense, over our servant on the day of Furqan. So what do we think about this, JC?
Well, what we think is that the Furqan is a time traveling thing, isn't it? It's in the past and in the tense, or it is something more either that it applies to different people during different epochs or something like that. It is not just a physical thing, or, well, you have the Quran and the Furqan is the Quran or the Torah, or it is just a way to interpret those. When you use the future tense, that means that it hasn't actually happened. And actually, it says that He will render a Furqan and will cover up your upfronts. So this is actually addressing people. So if you're actually talking or listening to somebody saying these words, that Furqan will happen for you at some point in the future. And it's associated as well with covering up your upfronts. So
And
past associated to
right.
Moses, guidance, future, and past tense. So let's see what else we've got. Oh, Day of Furqan. Very important. I forgot to actually put it on the clipboard, but that's all right. I wrote it now very, very quickly. So Day of Furqan, which it makes a lot of sense.
Day
Now,
of
with the
Fear, eh?
next ones, and these ones are just the last ones. I didn't actually add the names of the surahs, but can be found quite easily. So, from before, as guidance for humans, and descended the Furqan. So we have that now, that it was descended. And the next one, and indeed we have already advanced Moses and Aaron de Furqan. Okay. And blessed is he who continuously descended the Furqan over his servant. Okay, so we add those final bits and pieces. So we have now descended. It happens twice, or it is mentioned twice. That thing about given to Moses, we have also Aaron, so that's great. And we also have continuously descended. So those are all the notes from all of the places where Furqan appears in that manner. And let's see, now that we have all of this evidence, what happens when we put it all together. And but before we actually get there, there is a little note here, a note of curiosity perhaps, that in the book from Robert Hoyland, Seeing Islam as Others Saw It, he actually writes this very famous letter, parts of these famous letters from Leo III to Umar II. And at least on this source, he actually talks about the book, this thing that they composed, as Furqan, as opposed to Quran, which is actually quite interesting. Now, in Arabic, there is no T, so, but I think he was writing in Aramaic, Leo III. So he would actually
Well,
write it
no,
in that manner.
he
But
was
that's
writing.
certainly not
It
Quran.
was
It
Greek,
looks like
right?
he was writing Furqan.
He would be
Pardon?
writing in Greek, presumably. He was a Byzantine.
I think there was a note on the book on Robert Hoyland, and somehow I thought that it said something like Aramaic, which I thought it wouldn't have been. That it would have been more likely to be Greek, but somehow it's ringing Aramaic. It doesn't really matter. It was certainly not writing in Arabic. I don't think so, because Robert Hoyland writes Furqan, and they don't have the P in Arabic, so in a different language. But Furqan sounds much closer to Furqan than it does Quran. So it's kind of weird. It's like he didn't really know the name of the book, or there was some form of confusion.
And
But
what year was
as
this?
pardon,
What year was this? The letter from Leo to Umar II.
they coincided between 720 and 723, I think, if I remember correctly. So it would have been between those 2 years. Mm.
Okay, yeah,
And
exactly. So we're already at least 100 years after the supposed revelation of the Quran, which calls itself, according to what we understand when we're reading the Hafs today, that it refers to itself by the words Quran as the proper name of the revelation. So isn't it curious then that 100 years later, it's being referred to not as Quran, but as Furqan?
yes, and it's also, once we actually get to the meaning of the word, it would kind of make sense if he actually referred to it as Furqan because of the meaning. If he called it your criterion, well, we would have again the whole problem. Why would they call the book the Criterion? Is it because it's a criterion over other stuff? But the traditions are then not written until a really long time, and the Christians could say that the New Testament is, say, the Criterion over the Old one, because they have them both together. They put them together. But the early Muslims, they didn't do that. If they wanted their book to confirm the previous scriptures, they should have kept the full scriptures, have the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the newest Testament called the Quran. But that didn't happen. So it's just a curiosity thing that the one of the most well-informed people in probably of the epoch, which would be the Emperor of Byzantium, he actually refers to the book as Furqan, which is relevant to this topic of Furqan. And we have this, yes, because we had it as well on the screen from these letters that we will cover in future videos, of a note about Hajjaj, who had men gathered your ancient books, that is addressing Leo III to Umar II. And he's saying that Hajjaj gathered um, Umar's ancient books, which he replaced by others composed by himself according to his taste. Now, Hajjaj doesn't actually factor in on this conversation much, but we will talk about him in the future. It is actually part of all of this work that we're doing in this series of finding the Quran. So we will pretty much leave that one there. Remember that name because it will be very, very important very, very soon. And back to Furqan, we get this.
Yeah, so we went over these curiosities that we saw with the roots, the rotten roots per se. where there's a consistency across the sister Semitic languages on the semantic scope of the Semitic roots. And the same thing can be seen here, where we're looking at the P/F. The reason why here, as we touched on it, is that the P is the one that the consonant per se that's used across the Semitic, most Semitic languages, but I think it's in Ethiopic, in Arabic, they don't use the P sound, so they use the F sound instead. But it's effectively the same root. It just has a different pronunciation because they don't have the P sound in the Arabic language. So we're looking now at the P/F for the first consonant, and then the R second, Q third. And what we see here is for the Hebrew, the Furqan has the meaning of redemption, deliverance. Sometimes it means distinction or separation, as in you can see why the separation between the goats and the sheep on the day of judgment, right? That's what salvation is, right? So you can see the semantic connection there for those meanings. And the Aramaic, very similar: salvation, redemption, distinction. And then we see in the Aramaic here also criterion. So this it's this lingering off use, word, right? Which then gets highlighted when we look all the way in the bottom here. That's the only thing, bro. Like, trust, Aki. Arabic, it highlights this one usage of criterion. Although what can be said also is that we can't know for sure whether the Aramaic inherently had criterion here, or it was also adopted through cross-semination with the Arabic-speaking peoples. So we can't know for sure whether or not, just from this, whether criterion was there originally in the Aramaic. That said, let's look at the Syriac again as well. Salvation, redemption, and sometimes means distinction, similar to the Hebrew meaning, right? But fundamentally, what we can see here is a very theologically rich and important root. Why? Because it's all what the Abrahamic religion is about, is deliverance, salvation from sin. And that's why this word is so crucial and used very heavily also in the Syriac tradition, which we'll see very shortly. But just the point here to note is that Arabic highlights this one offhand meaning, or this one conception of the word criterion, all the way up, and totally drops every meaning of salvation and deliverance, which was, and you can see here, is the fundamental meaning of the root. So let's have a look now also into the Peshitta, I think.
Well, we see that, and actually what we discussed last time, and we will continue to discuss going forward, is the whole problem with the Aramaic, that the book was, for the most part, most likely for the most part, if not wholly, not wholly, saying whole, Aramaic. So when we look at words that have a little bit of a problem between Arabic and the other Semitic languages, we should really be looking at the Aramaic, and particularly when the meaning actually doesn't match the other languages. So in Arabic, it now means criterion, but we know that that's because it is in the Quran and it's been there for a really long time. But even if that happened by coincidence, we would still need to go back to the Aramaic or Syriac, and we would see that salvation and redemption, they are the two important words. Now, when we look at everything that we have noted before about Furqan, and we think, okay, so criterion would be in the Arabic, and that's just fine, but this book was not Arabic. So could it actually make sense about salvation or redemption? And when we go through pretty much everything that we have seen here, it just makes sense. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, the thing is, we'll start going. We'll go one by one. Given to Moses and Aaron, salvation is salvation given to them. They made it in heaven. Salvation was granted. Okay, it works. But, and here's even better, because we could have went on into this on when we were looking through the verses, right? But the second meaning here is, of course, deliverance, and everyone knows about the story of the deliverance of the Jewish people in the book of Exodus from Pharaoh. He and his brother, so Moses and Aaron, were given deliverance, right? So that one makes perfect sense. And the next one, guidance and the Furqan, descended during the month of Ramadan. So this one could be salvation, descended in the month of Ramadan. I think that, well, we can get into it. The verse is actually referring to the Apostles' fast and is talking about Pentecost in remembrance. But, next one, he will render in the future. Wait, so he will render in the future salvation? Yes, we will be granted salvation in the future tense on the day of judgment on the day of salvation. And he, in also past tense, in the past, was descended or given salvation slash deliverance to the people, to the Israelites, and so on. Yes, that works too. And here's the okay. We'll save that for last. So continuously descended. This is a word that we're going to get into in more and more detail, because it's basically based on the way the Arabic is conjugated effectively, where it's best translated into the English, which is what Murad does, as continuously descended. And this is distinct from simple descension. So continuous descension means it's descended now, yesterday, today, tomorrow, in 100 years, right? It's continuously descending. And that is what salvation is. Deliverance and salvation is continuously descended. Why? Because of Christ's sacrifice. So, and leaving it to last, the day of Furqan, does that make sense as day of Criterion? Not
It
really.
makes Well, it really depends who you ask. Probably if you ask any Muslim, they will tell you that yes, it makes perfect sense. When we have, well, the verse here now on screen is from Sahih International, instead of putting actually Saint Murad's again, so that we can see the impact a little bit. So it says, if you have believed in Allah and in that which we sent down to our servant on the day of Criterion, on the
Yes,
day of
actually.
salvation, and then the day when the two armies met and Allah over all things is competent. Now, the day of Criterion, if we're thinking first of all, who is our servant? We, of course, well, Muslims would immediately think anything that is vague like this is probably going to be about Muhammad, but it's not. Let's say that that's actually talking about Moses or about Mary. We don't know who this is talking about. Is their servant. Certainly the people listening to these verses, they knew who they were talking about, but for everybody else, they're trying to shoehorn probably Muhammad. I haven't actually checked the tafsir for this one, but I'm sure it's always the same case. But if that is Moses on the day of salvation, oh no, that's probably something to do with the time of Jesus. Also, it is worth noting that there is no two armies met. The day when the two armies met, that thing is actually not there at all. If you read the translation from Saint Murad, which was on the screen earlier, it says something actually quite different, and you can read a lot into those verses. But the two armies fighting, this is what you get from the English translations. But anyway, so we think about the day of Criterion. Does that make any sense with the Abrahamic faith and what we know about the stories of Moses and the stories of Jesus? Or what about day of salvation? Or like you said just earlier, day of deliverance? Could this be talking about Moses and we send down to our servant Moses, servant, just like in Surah 17, verse 1? Isn't that funny? On the day of deliverance, the day when they um, were saved from Egypt. Could this be talking about that? I wonder.
Right. So we can basically debate this a little bit, right? It's either, and this is the thing, what's so hilarious about it, right? It's either about the day of deliverance, that being the two armies here, is what I think Murad says, two groups, right? So what you could see it as is the two armies, or the two groups here would be the group of the Israelites and then the group of the Pharaoh's armies. And that what was sent down upon our servant Moses on the day of deliverance was, was it the angel of the Lord, and then if you believe in the angel of the Lord, you're believing in Christ, then you're saved, right? Or what we're talking about is the day of salvation, and the two groups that are meeting are the group of those who believed in Christ, his disciples, and then the Pharisees, potentially. And that what you're meant to believe in is what we sent down upon our servant on the day of salvation, which could refer potentially to the Holy Spirit, although there's that's not as clean, but something else, right? So we can debate this. I have my own perspective. Who knows? We can get into concrete on that and make sure we get the perfect right interpretation. But for the time being, right now, what we're dealing with is the question of, okay, well, the servant here, 100% Momo Aki for sure. And is this the day of Criterion now? Is that what we're talking about? What was sent down upon Muhammad on the day of Criterion? When was the day of Criterion? Was that when the day when the Quran descended? It's all very forced, right? So yeah, I would argue very confidently we're not dealing with the day of Criterion here. We're dealing with either the day of salvation or the day of deliverance.
That would certainly make sense. I think we've all heard terms like Day of Salvation um, or redemption or anything of the sort, or even the day of what was it with Dean? Anyway, we will cover that one as well at one point. So, but yes, it's certainly the whole Criterion thing doesn't really make sense with the way that it is explained as to signify when we look at the Quran, how it is actually used in terms of Moses and then in the future tense, in the past tense. And when you are thinking about in the Aramaic terms, salvation is like, okay, so yes, this will be salvation for you, but also the salvation that was sent to Moses and so on, then it makes sense. But Criterion would be something like quite distinct and different. And I think, fortunately, we have a few other examples to really enhance the claim that Furqan was never Criterion, but it was the Aramaic word for redemption, salvation, and deliverance.
So what we're looking at here is the word Furqana. It's in the Aramaic and Syriac, Syriac being a dialect of Aramaic, of course. And we looked a little bit at this during the earlier picture when we were looking at the different languages, the different meanings. The crucial thing here is to note that we have attestations of the use of this term in very theologically rich and important contexts, particularly, I mean, here's one example. Matthew 20:28 in the Peshitta, the word Furqana is used in the context of the verse. I'll read it out. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life as and those who are familiar with the English translations will read this most often as a ransom for many. The word used here in the Peshitta is Furqana. So it's as a redemption, deliverance, salvation, ransom works too. It all means the same thing. We know what we're reading when we're talking about this. This is referring to his sacrifice, which redeems a multitude. And just looking under here, you can just see the Syriac dictionary. You can use the source to validate this yourself. Just type in salvation into the search bar, and you'll very quickly find the word Furqana given to you in the Syriac script. So that's one example. Let's look further into detail in what we can see in the Peshitta itself. I put the first one on here again. It's the same verse we just spoke on, so I'll skip over it. But you can just see it here on this source. This is direct text from the Peshitta. And for Acts 28:28, there we can see in a lovely magnifying glass the word Furqana in question. Moving to Acts 28:28, we read, "Be this therefore known to you, that to the Gentiles is sent this redemption, for they will also hear it." Most translations give the word salvation here. It means the same thing. It means Furqana. So let's zoom in as well to verify. Yep, we have the word Furqana here attested, again, in very important context theologically. So this word would have been heavily used in liturgy and is, and we'll see that in a second, by Syriac and Aramaic speaking Christians and Jews alike. So it comes to reason that when the word Furqan is likely having this meaning. So let's look outside the Peshitta, also in other texts beyond the Peshitta. We have, this is a source which goes into the hymn of the Kurbana. I think it's written somewhere here. Yeah, the eschatology of this East Syrian Kurbana. This is a part of their liturgy where we see in a hymn that it says the text, Savior of our souls. This is written as Furqan de Nafshathan. I can't read Syriac. I apologize for butchering that. The point what to note here is that the root, the PRQ root, is essentially conjugated. I don't know if that's the right word because that's usually for verbs, right? But you see that instead of Furqana, we have Furqan. Same root, has the same meaning, but instead of meaning salvation, it means savior. So it's making it a noun of a person, an identifiable subject who is the savior. Or instead of deliverance, it would mean deliverer, right? So that's why we read here, Furqan de, and then the word again, to mean savior of our souls. And this is a title which is applied to Jesus. So you can see how this is gaining momentum here in the importance of this word theologically. It is used in the context of the broad question of how do we get to heaven? Through salvation, through Furqana. And who is Jesus? Well, he's the Furqan, he's the Savior. So that's just a quick overview to see how the word Furqana is extremely significant in the Christian Syriac tradition. Let's move on, and we'll have a look then also at what salvation did Moses receive. And this is just to show also that what we're talking about here is also written about by other scholars. So this is from Fred Donner's work. I'm just going to read the relevant portions here, which is that we see that the Moses refers to the miracle of the crossing of the Red Sea in the Exodus text as the salvation of the Lord, the Prukane de Maria, where Maria here means Lord. And we see that, well, basically, we're just seeing here that the connection is being made by Fred Donner as well, that Furqan could potentially have been a derivative of the Syriac Furqana. And I would argue that's very likely the case. And also when we saw that when the two groups meet, that verse is either talking about the crucifixion or it's talking about the crossing of the Red Sea. Fred Donner here is making the connection that potentially it's referring to the salvation of the Lord, because we do have, and this is crucial, we have the word itself attested in the Aramaic translations of the Old Testament, where they use the word Prukane, which has the same root we're talking about, it's the same word, to talk about the deliverance of Moses from Pharaoh.
Yes, there are then these links quite well as well with why would Leo III be calling this tome of books that the Arabs were starting to learn as something like Furqan. So it still uses the P, but it's starting to change a little bit. He doesn't actually call it your Furqana, it's calling the Furqan, something like in between. It's almost like the language is starting to be changed slightly, so maybe he doesn't make that connection.
Well,
But it's certainly.
it's not
Pardon?
quite that, because okay, so the original word would have been and would have retained its meaning as being Furqana. When you go from the Aramaic to the Arabic, the final suffix a, so Furqana, that represents the definite article. So we see this very often in the Quranic text, where then we have an Aramaic word and then it becomes an Arabic word where the a is removed. So instead of Furqana, it would be Furqan, right? And then the al definite article would be attached. So you go from Furqana to al Furqan. The thing is, the next step, which happens right away, is that if you're now using the Arabic script and speaking the Arabic language, it's no longer al Furqan, it's now al Furqan. And the reason why it would be transliterated by a Byzantine emperor as Furqan is because that's how it would have been sounding to the ears of the Greek. Because the letter is written very in the early Rostam as an F. There is no P. So I don't think we should assume necessarily that what we're dealing with here is in the 730s or 720s when we have the letter from Leo, latestly that, right? Or earliestly that, I should say, rather. We shouldn't assume that what's happening there is that he is listening and hearing them actually say the word Furqan. It's rather more likely that he is transliterating it. Or, like you said, if it wasn't a letter in the Aramaic language, then he would be using, obviously, the Aramaic version of the word, because the word al-Furqan or Furqana would be the word Furqana or al-Furqan in the Aramaic tongue, because the F and the P correspond in that way to the different languages.
Yeah, and you mentioned as well that in the Eastern Syriac would be like Po, pretty much as opposed to Pu,
Right.
which means there were dialects or basically different versions of stuff. So at one point it reaches to his ears, he just transliterates that, say the best he can, but certainly is not Quran. So he's talking about this word. If at that point they had still the understanding that this word has something to do maybe with salvation, then that would make sense. That says, okay, and these people wrote your salvation. Now, if the meaning had already changed in the Arabic and it was your criterion, it would also make sense that it's starting to actually get confused. But when the actual word was first put together on paper, or it was spoken out loud by people, we would need to still be looking at the Aramaic meaning as opposed to the Arabic one, because it looks like salvation in Arabic, salvation and redemption was never really used. However, when we look at the verses in the Quran, certainly salvation, redemption, and deliverance makes a lot more sense than looking at it as criterion. So it's possible that Leo III already saw that as, what is this book that they have? Oh, a criterion. To them is criterion. Okay, fair enough. I'll take it. That we will not know, or maybe we will as we start looking in more depth the history and the historical angle of what was happening there between the years, well, 600 and 800. But for now, still with the Quran, it's just surprising that this guy didn't actually call this very famous book Quran. But I'm sure we will get to that one.
Right. So, and this is just one of the pieces. So, what we've introduced today, and we've done it very quickly, is simply one puzzle piece, and that is the word of Furqan. Right. So, when you're reading the Arabic text, if you're actually going into it, and I would recommend this to everyone, what you should do is you should throw some money to Saint Murad, get his translation. He has a cheaper version and a more expensive version, whatever, right? But get your hands on a Murad translation, because then what you can do after that is you can just start reading the text and you'll see things, it'll just pop out at you of what really is going on here. Then go and look at the translations, and we'll go into that soon in our next live stream of the translations. But the point here is that this is one of the puzzle pieces. Once you have this, then you could go to verses like we were looking at before, where it's talking about the dissension of the Furqan. And like you were saying, JC, when you were talking about the verse about Moses being given the Torah and the Furqan, that it brings to mind, okay, what could that be? Is that the Ten Commandments? My mind went there myself, so you're not the only one. But then you have, once you have this piece now, you're like, oh, it's talking about salvation. Okay, so either this is the Quranic author responding to a polemic by Jews who are saying, what you believe in, that Jesus is the only way into heaven. What do you believe that Moses is in hell then? Because he was before Jesus. And then the response to that was that no, he was given salvation. Why? Because he was given the Torah by the angel of the Lord, which is linked to the divine word, which is linked to Christ. And hence he met Christ, and hence no, he doesn't go to hell because he was before Christ, because Christ was before Moses, is the point, right? So that's one way of reading it with the puzzle piece now in hand, or you can understand it as deliverance. And yes, Moses was given the Torah and deliverance from Pharaoh. Those are kind of his two big things, right? So once you have the one puzzle piece, you can start unlocking even more effectively other puzzle pieces, and then you start having a satchel on your waist full of puzzle pieces which have been deciphered, and then you will rapidly see that the dominoes start to fall.
Yes, and certainly Furqan is one of those that make the case quite clear that when you look at it about in the Aramaic, you see how that was the original language, and then you can also see, well, a number of things. One is how the language evolved. Also, you can see how they have used the diacritical marks, although that's something that will be used later. And it is worth mentioning that, for example, Saint Murad, he knows that this is like Aramaic. He mentions the problem with the word Furqan before, and he mentions that it was Aramaic and it means redemption. So we really hope that we are actually going to get at one point full Aramaic translation of the Quran. Basically, it's reverting back the Quran that we have to the proto-Quran, to the previous version, to know what it says. And I think we will all be very much shocked as to what it is that the Quran originally said before it got translated into Arabic. So let us all hope that we get at one point that final version, because it will give everyone a lot of closure and understanding exactly what this book has been about. For now, we are just taking bits and pieces, putting them together, and trying to make that picture clear in preparation for hopefully a final version, final translations where we see exactly the meaning. And with that, I think we've got our Furqan being all about salvation, redemption, and deliverance complete. And next time, we're going to be talking about translations, or rather mistranslations. So hopefully the next session is going to be a lot of fun, because we're going to delve quite deep into the translation from Saint Murad. He's obviously very, his translation is very literal. So it shows two things. One is his translation gives answers, but perhaps even more importantly, it provides the right questions, or the ability to ask the right questions. Once he doesn't translate a word because it was not Arabic, we can zero in on that one, and so on. So in the next session, we are going to look at some of the things that he translates, and we're going to compare them with what the standard translators use, say, and so on. And hopefully it's going to be a lot of fun for any Muslims watching. I think they will enjoy it, because they will not be able to escape from that one if they see that Sahih International and all of the other guys translate tenses wrong, and some words really are, they have no excuse to get it wrong, and still they do, when their one job as translators is to actually get it right. People will see that, okay, hopefully Muslims will see that they need to dig into this deeper, because their translations are not really working for them but against them. So that will be the next thing on our to-do list, right, Kash?
Right, and I would recommend any Muslim come in because you're going to enjoy it. You won't be able to stop yourself personally from laughing as well. It's absurd how intentional and malevolent, frankly, these translators are acting. And just a little thing that I'm going to bring out, you'll see also in one of these mistranslations an example of Allah talking to his beloved son, which is very fun.
Yes, cool. So let's just take a moment and actually have a look at the message that we've got from people watching. Do forgive me if I do anything wrong with these things. This is very new thing for me, and despite of my very, very young voice, I'm a very old man, so I struggle with technological things. So here we've got from someone. Would you like Cash to read the name of our new friend here?
Unfortunately, I'm no risky.
Um, okay, so well, hi. He says, "Hi guys, hi. Thank you for actually being here. You are going to really enjoy the things that we're going to be talking about. They come out of doing the research from the work of Saint Murad, and then going through the Aramaic and trying to really put all of these pieces together. So it's going to be great. I hope that you will really enjoy it."
JC,
Um,
first before you go there, I just realized something that I thought was funny. I was trying to read that Syriac text, right, the Russian text, and I'm so used to now trying to read Arabic that I was reading it from right to left. And I was like, wait, this is not making any sense.
Actually, it could be. Yes, yes. That's how it is. Once you actually spend too much time looking at ancient manuscripts, Arabic manuscripts, and things like that, you start, your whole world goes upside down, which is really, really interesting. So, Kiroman, hello. Just discovered your channel. Saint Murad brought attention to you guys. Okay, well, that's phenomenal. I really want to reach out to Saint Murad, and hopefully we can all talk with him, because we have some things that we believe he can probably answer. And of course, this is not our area of expertise, the language, and he might solve some things in 5 minutes when it will take us months. So hopefully that will happen. I'm actually just surprised that he even knows that we exist at this point, but that's phenomenal. Which reminds me, please do like, share, and subscribe. It looks like the algorithm is not something I do very well, and we really depend on people just sharing this stuff. By the time that we get to the 10th session, we really want as many people in there, because we are going to talk about some very serious and very fun stuff. So thank you for the comment. Great to hear that actually someone that knows that we are actually
Where
here.
did he say
We're going to be
something?
using his work in every single slide, actually, in every single show.
Kiroman, if you're still here, could you write where he brought attention to us? Because I would love to watch that myself.
Yes, okay. So please do that, because yeah, we want to see actually what happened, what he was doing, to and what he was talking about. Maybe he made some comments as well that we can use in our next videos, which is great, right? Let's see. Domain of knowledge. Yeah. What does the
It's
word Ramadan mean?
it's related to heat. So it's the month of scorching heat, and this is linked to the just it's in remembrance of the Pentecost. But it's basically it's a month that in the Jewish calendar is referred to by the word like related to scorching. It was a while ago when I looked into this, but it is related to the month of like burning heat. You can imagine it's actually pretty much right now when we are hitting very hot temperatures. Actually, no, that's summer, right? I don't know. My brain's all over the place, but it's related to a month of scorching heat. And you can look up the Jewish calendar. There's a word that's very similar.
And we actually posted a video about talking, well, one about Ramadan and the other one about the halal food and so on. And it already shows that the Ramadan, as they think it is now, is something different. So there was certainly a fasting that was commanded in the Quran, except that it has nothing to do with what they are doing now. And the whole thing about the Ramadan and the moon, all of those things are traditions. So we will delve into these, say, individual words in the future. But as I kind of we alluded to earlier, there are other keywords in that very specific verse, and we need to actually just build up the different techniques that they have been using until we actually get to the big reveal. Hopefully, that will then help understand the word Ramadan. But we need to actually build those techniques. It's not as simple as just dropping the word and saying this is what it means without giving the correct steps to actually get there. Um, let's see. I love these discussions and the talks with Joe. Yes, Joe is phenomenal. His knowledge in particularly, he has this side of history. Things we don't know exactly what happened with the creation of Islam. Nobody knows. Otherwise, we would all know. So everybody has different pieces of the jigsaw. But most people, they have, say, the sources more like from Byzantium and things like this. He has this very strong knowledge on like Jewish sources, and for some reason they are not very well known. So he actually has that thing which nobody else has. I'm not going to say that everything that he says is like absolutely perfect, but he has lots of pieces in there that nobody is able to see. If we got his knowledge with the knowledge of the guys that have all of the other pieces and we put them together, we would get to the truth. And in many ways he is very much almost ignored when he has some pieces of information that should really be looking into. And he's a very nice guy. I really love talking to him. Hopefully actually we have him over at one point over here, and he can actually talk about the same things again about the history of Islam, which is very, very fascinating. And he says things that nobody else actually does. So, oh, Kiroman, so glad that you actually like the stuff. The video that I like the most, probably from all of the ones that we have, is the one about the sheep eating the verses, and I think it's the oldest in the channel. I thought that one was going to be a hit, that people were going to like it, but it didn't actually go anywhere, which is unfortunate because I find it very, very funny. So I hope that you actually watched it and that you actually enjoyed it too. And Saint Murad made a post to follow us. Okay, phenomenal. I'm really glad that he actually has done that. Yep, Saint Murad.
Wow.
Okay. Well, if you're actually in direct contact with him, make sure that you send him our love and appreciation for everything that he has actually done. His translation only came out when was it October, November last year, and without it, we would be pretty much stuck, still relying on Google Translate to give us information. And Google Translate, yes, uses the Sahih International and things like this. It doesn't actually do direct translations. AI helps a little bit, but sometimes it feels like ChatGPT has taken the Shahada and it just gives you the standard Islamic narrative as opposed to give you the actual answers. So his translation is phenomenal, and we hope to actually make him proud by showing the sort of stuff that we have been able to find because we are piggybacking on his work so much.
It's like basically that without Murad's translation, we'd be blind. And what Murad did is he gave us eyes so we can actually see what we're dealing with, which is the biggest contribution you can possibly do for this field.
Yeah. Fortunately, the goat didn't eat the whole Quran. He just ate some bits and pieces, but he left enough for us to unpick and work out. And that's what will happen next. So, Kash, would you like to say something about what we're going to be doing next and so on?
Well, next we're going to go through some of the mistranslations, and then we're going to keep building like we did today with this one puzzle piece. Hopefully, we get through many, many more of them very quickly, and it will all culminate into the big reveal, which I won't spoil. I have a tendency to spoil, so we'll leave it mysterious.
Yeah, I do the same too. But all right, so looking forward to the next ones. The next one should be fun because we are just going to show all of these things that we have mentioned, and we keep building and moving in that direction. Where at the end we're going to find the answers to some very key words in the Quran and understand what the original meaning was, even before we get a fantastic Aramaic translation, which will help us all. So with that, that I think is all for from us for today. Kash, would you like to say some last words?
No, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. If anyone is still here listening and the video then goes live, could you write in the comments on which platform Murad made a post? Because I would love to see what's going on here. I've been trying to look and I have no oversight. I'm totally confused on where Murad spoke about this channel.
Oh yeah, and also if seeing as next time we're going to talk about actual gross mistranslations, things that in the very clear Arabic says one thing, but all of the translations except for Saint Murad said something else. So if you have any favorite mistranslation that you would like to let us know in the comment section, please do so as we prepare our slides. If we really like the thing that you are saying, if we haven't seen it before, maybe we can actually add it to the next slideshow, or maybe we can actually even discuss it there live. Let's see which ones are your favorite mistranslations. Great. So thank you all for watching, and we will see you all next time. God
Thank
bless.
you
Take
all.
care.
Take care.